Have you ever wondered what really happens in your child's heart when you're not around? Not just physically, like when you're away on a trip or they've moved to another city, but emotionally. When you pull back, grow quieter, or simply start living your own life more, do they notice? Do they care? Or do they just carry on as if nothing's changed? It's a question many parents over 60 quietly ask themselves, especially in moments of solitude. You raise your kids, you give them the best years of your life, and then one day, they're grown, busy, caught up in their own world. You're no longer the center of their lives, and it's natural to wonder, do I still matter to them when I'm not there? Let's talk about that. Because the truth is, your absence, whether it's a little space or a long silence, says a lot more than you think. And how your children respond to it often reveals what they feel, but don't always say. Sometimes, as we age, we assume our children just move on. We see their texts become shorter, the calls less frequent. We chalk it up to modern life, and maybe that's part of it. But there's another part, the emotional truth, that many seniors ignore. Your children feel more than they show. The truth is, most kids carry a silent bond with their parents even long after they leave home. That bond doesn't disappear when you stop calling every week. It doesn't vanish when you start keeping more to yourself. But how that bond plays out, how strong it remains, often depends on the relationship you've built and how much you still allow yourself to matter. Let me ask you something. Have you ever intentionally stepped back, maybe stopped checking in so often just to see what happens? Maybe you were curious if they'd notice. Or maybe you were tired of always being the one to reach out. What happened next? Did they rush to call you? Or was there silence? That silence, whether it lasted a day or a month, said something. And whatever you felt in that space, you can be sure they felt something too. It might have been confusion, guilt, relief, or even worry. But here's the important part. Absence makes people reflect. And for children, especially adult children, your absence can stir up emotions they don't expect to feel. Some kids feel a subtle ache when their parent pulls away. They may not say it out loud, but suddenly they catch themselves thinking of you more often. They scroll through old photos. They hear a song or smell a familiar scent, and it reminds them of home or of you. They might not always act on it, but the feeling is there, and it lingers. For others, your absence triggers something deeper, a quiet sense of guilt. They remember the times they didn't pick up your call, the birthday they almost forgot, the last visit they rushed through because they had somewhere else to be. And now, with you quieter, they begin to wonder, did I take them for granted? There's also a third reaction, and it can be the hardest to accept. Some children feel nothing. Not because they don't love you, but because the relationship never grew beyond duty. You may have loved deeply, but they never learned how to love back with the same strength. Or maybe there were old wounds, unspoken resentment, misunderstandings never resolved. In those cases, your absence becomes a kind of relief. And that hurts. But even that truth is important, because it helps you stop guessing and start understanding. See, absence, when used with intention, has a way of revealing the emotional landscape beneath the surface. And at this stage of life, clarity is far more valuable than comfort. Because once you know where you stand, you can stop chasing after moments that no longer serve you. And you can start building from a place of strength, not need. Now let's not confuse stepping back with walking away. You're not disappearing from their lives. You're simply creating space. Space for them to choose how much they want to connect. Space for you to breathe and reflect on your role in this next season of life. Because one of the quiet truths of aging is this: your emotional presence used to be something they needed. Now it's something they have to value. And if they don't, your absence gives them a chance to realize that. Let me share something personal. A man I once met, Harold, told me about how after turning 68, he stopped initiating calls with his adult children for a month. Not out of anger, He just wanted to see if they'd notice. At first, nothing. A few days passed. Then a week. He started wondering if he was right to do it. But then something shifted. His daughter called. She said, "Dad, I haven't heard from you in a while. Are you okay?" And when he said, "I've just been giving you space," she paused and said softly, "I didn't realize how much I missed you until now." That moment changed everything, not because she called, but because she realized what his presence meant. And that realization only came because of his quiet absence. What Harold did wasn't manipulation. It was self-respect. Sometimes you have to stop giving so much so the people around you can see just how much they've been receiving. As parents, especially after 60, it's easy to forget that you still matter, not just in memory, but in their present lives. You've been the one holding the line, keeping traditions alive, remembering birthdays, sending little notes. And maybe it feels like no one notices, but they do. They just don't always say it, until you're not there. Now, what about those children who don't respond? The ones who remain silent even after weeks or months? That's painful. But it's also informative. Their silence isn't always rejection. It might be discomfort, immaturity, or even emotional distance they don't know how to bridge. And while it's not your job to fix that, it is your choice whether or not to keep investing in someone who never shows up for you. You have every right, at this stage in life, to protect your peace, to give your love where it's returned, and to recognize that being a parent doesn't mean you have to be endlessly available, especially if the connection is one-sided. Your presence is a gift, and so is your absence, because both reveal the truth in different ways. And when you start to honor that truth, your relationships either deepen or clarify. So if you've ever asked yourself, do my kids really feel anything when I'm not around? The answer is yes. But what they feel tells you everything you need to know about where you stand. And as hard as that truth may be, it's also freeing. Let's keep going. Because there's more to uncover, not just about what your children feel when you're not around, but what it means for how you live, love, and connect in this powerful stage of life. Sometimes, the most powerful truths don't show up in grand gestures. They show up in the quiet moments. A missed call that never gets returned. A holiday spent alone when you used to cook for a table full of people. A birthday message that goes unanswered. These moments are small, but they carry weight. And the older you get, the more deeply you feel them. Not because you're needy, but because you remember what it was like when family meant everything, and being there for each other was simply what you did. And here's something you might not have considered. Your children notice those moments too. Maybe not right away. Maybe not with the same depth. But over time, absence creates reflection. Especially if you've always been the steady one, the anchor, the quiet provider. When that presence starts to fade, the people who counted on it, whether they admit it or not, start to feel the difference. For some, this becomes a moment of awakening, a soft tug on the heart that says, "I've taken something for granted." They may not know how to say it. They may stumble in their efforts to reconnect. But deep down, something shifts. They begin to see you not just as a parent, but as a person. A human being with needs, feelings, and a life that doesn't revolve around them. That shift is important. Because until your children see you as a person, not just mom or dad, they won't fully understand what your absence really means. It's not just a missing voice on the phone. It's a loss of wisdom, kindness, consistency. And sometimes they only begin to grasp that when you stop filling every empty space for them. I've met so many older adults who say, "I don't want to be a burden." And I understand that. But sometimes, in trying so hard not to be a burden, we disappear. We shrink ourselves down to avoid being in the way. We say things like, "They're busy," or "They'll call when they have time." And while there's truth in that, it can also be a story we tell ourselves to avoid the sting of disappointment. But here's something worth remembering. You don't have to make yourself invisible in order to be respected. In fact, the opposite is often true. When you take a step back, not out of resentment, but out of quiet self-worth, you give your children the space to decide whether they'll meet you halfway. And that moment of decision is revealing. Now let's talk about something that often goes unsaid: guilt. When you pull back, some of your children will feel it, not just emotionally, but in their conscience. And that guilt can show up in different ways. Maybe they start calling more often, but sound rushed. Maybe they send a gift instead of showing up in person. Maybe they over-explain why they've been so busy. That guilt isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's the spark that wakes someone up to how absent they've been. But here's the key: you can't chase them out of guilt or try to comfort them for feeling what they feel. Let the weight of your absence do what it's meant to do: inspire reflection. If the relationship matters to them, they'll come around with something more genuine than guilt. They'll show you love not because they feel bad, but because they finally recognize what you've always given. Of course, not all children will respond that way. And that's where things get difficult. Because love doesn't always flow equally, even in families. Sometimes, no matter how kind or patient or supportive you've been, a child may drift. They may prioritize other people, or choose silence over connection. And when that happens, the question becomes, do you keep reaching out? Or do you let go? Only you can answer that. But I'll offer this: don't keep pouring into a cup that's never held you with care. Protect your peace. There's a quiet dignity in choosing not to chase people, especially when you've already given them so much of yourself. Your absence isn't a punishment. It's a boundary. And boundaries, especially in later life, are a form of self-love. There's also another feeling your absence can stir up: fear. Not fear in the traditional sense, but fear of loss. A child may suddenly realize that time with you is not unlimited, that your voice, your presence, your laughter, these are not permanent fixtures. And that awareness can shake something loose, a kind of urgency that wasn't there before. They might not say it, but you'll feel it. In the way they show up more often, in the longer hugs, in the way they start listening to you again, asking questions, wanting to know what's on your mind, not just what's for dinner. This fear isn't meant to make them panic. It's meant to make them present. Because sometimes the only way we learn to cherish something is when we realize we could lose it. That's not manipulation. It's just human nature. And this is where your role as a parent changes. You are no longer the one constantly giving, guiding, or reminding. Now, you are the mirror. The presence that reflects back who they are becoming, and what kind of child they choose to be now that the foundation has been laid. Will they step up? Will they show gratitude? Or will they disappear into their own lives, believing you'll always be there, waiting? If they choose to show up, really show up, then your absence has done something profound. It's helped them grow. It's reminded them of the quiet love that doesn't demand, but still deserves. But if they don't, if they vanish into silence or make excuses or treat you like an afterthought, then maybe, just maybe, that clarity was a gift in disguise. Not a pleasant one, but a necessary one. Because what you deserve, especially now, is peace. Love without condition, but also love with balance. Not one-sided giving. Not constant effort without return. You deserve to be seen, to be respected. And if that comes through the space you create, so be it. Your value doesn't disappear when you stop calling every day. It doesn't fade when you're no longer the one holding every thread of the family together. In fact, that's often when it starts to shine, when others realize just how much you meant, once your voice becomes quiet. You see, one of the hardest lessons in this stage of life is realizing that love is not always loud. It doesn't always show up with flowers, long phone calls, or grand visits. Sometimes it shows up in the smallest moments: a quick text to check in, a child stopping by for coffee, or even the way they mention you in a conversation with pride in their voice. These moments are easy to miss if you're only looking for big gestures. But if you pay close attention, you'll start to see where love still lives, even if it's quiet. That said, it's okay to want more. It's okay to want your children to be more present, more engaged, more emotionally connected. Wanting that doesn't make you needy, it makes you human. After all, you've spent decades showing up for them. You've been the one to listen, to guide, to sacrifice. Wanting some of that returned isn't selfish. It's a natural desire for mutual love. But here's the tricky part. You can't force it. You can't guilt your children into caring. You can't pressure them into presence. What you can do is invite them, through your actions, your boundaries, and yes, even your absence. You show them what respect looks like by giving it to yourself first. When you stop overgiving, when you stop constantly adjusting to make everyone else comfortable, something powerful happens. You start to feel more at peace, and that peace is magnetic. Your children, whether they're aware of it or not, start to feel the shift. They begin to realize that your world no longer revolves around them, and that's not rejection. It's reality. And for many, that realization creates a ripple. It challenges them to reconsider the role they want to play in your life moving forward. Some will lean in, others may pull away. Both are answers. You're not responsible for fixing the emotional maturity of your children. That's their work. Your job now is to live your life fully, to nurture your own joy, and to continue becoming the kind of person you'd want to spend time with, because that energy is what others respond to. Let me tell you something else that might surprise you. Your absence may not only affect your children, it might also change you. When you start taking time for yourself, when you give yourself permission to not always be available, something begins to heal. You reconnect with parts of yourself that might have been lost in the years of caregiving and selflessness. Maybe you rediscover old hobbies, make new friends, or simply learn how to enjoy your own company. Maybe you stop waiting for their call and start planning your own day. Maybe you stop feeling guilty for saying no. Whatever it looks like for you, know this. That's growth. That's not becoming distant. It's becoming whole. And when you live from that place of wholeness, you bring something even more powerful into every relationship you still choose to nurture. You're not showing up from lack, but from fullness. You're not demanding their time, but offering your presence as a gift, not an obligation. And believe me, they can feel the difference. Children, no matter how grown they are always watching. They learn from how you treat yourself. And if they see you honoring your time, your peace, and your boundaries, they may eventually start doing the same in their own lives. That's a legacy far greater than any inheritance. Now, some of you might still be waiting. Waiting for that one child to come back around. Waiting for an apology. Waiting for something to feel like it used to. And I want you to know, waiting is not weakness. But waiting forever for someone who's shown you over and over that they aren't willing to meet you halfway, that's not hope. That's hurt disguised as patience. You don't need to wait to feel worthy. You don't need to wait to live your life. If they come back, let it be a bonus, not the goal. Because the goal now is you, your health, your happiness, your sense of peace and meaning. And that starts by acknowledging that your presence is powerful, but so is your absence. And sometimes, the very thing that brings someone closer is the space you give them to realize what they're missing. But whether they see it or not doesn't change your value. So what do your kids feel when you're not around? They may feel guilt, longing, discomfort, even fear. Or sometimes nothing at all. And every one of those reactions is a message. But what matters most isn't just what they feel. It's what you do with the truth their feelings reveal. You deserve love that's not just given out of habit, but out of genuine care. You deserve relationships that feed your soul, not just your calendar. And if that means stepping back so you can see clearly, then that is one of the bravest things you can do. It takes courage to stop chasing, to stop reminding, to stop filling in all the spaces they never bother to notice. But when you do, something incredible happens. You make room for your peace, for real connection, for the kind of love that doesn't disappear just because you stopped calling first. And if you're wondering whether you still matter in their lives, remember this: the people who truly love you will find their way back. They may be slow, they may be imperfect, but they'll come not because you begged, but because they finally understood what your presence meant and what your absence taught them. It's a strange thing, isn't it? The way distance can make things clearer. The way stepping back can sometimes speak louder than years of trying. You spend your whole life giving, your time, your energy, your love, and then you reach a point where you start to ask yourself, what comes back to me? Not in a selfish way, but in an honest one. And that question deserves an answer. You're not just someone's parent. You're a person who has lived, endured, sacrificed, and learned. You've gone through seasons of joy and heartbreak, of building and letting go. And now you deserve more than just to be remembered. You deserve to be valued. That value doesn't diminish just because the phone doesn't ring. It doesn't vanish when no one asks how your day was. It's still there, quiet but unshaken, rooted in a lifetime of being someone who showed up even when it wasn't easy. Maybe your children haven't seen that clearly yet. Maybe life has clouded their vision. But that doesn't mean your worth has disappeared. And if they do come back, if they call or visit or begin again, don't just fall back into the same pattern out of habit. Let them show you with consistency that they see you now in ways they didn't before. That's not being cold. That's having standards. That's realizing that love and respect go hand in hand, and one without the other is not enough anymore. It's okay to say, I want more honesty in this relationship. It's okay to ask for deeper conversations, for time spent without distractions, for moments that feel real and not just rushed. You've earned that. Not by demanding it, but by living a life full of love, patience, and strength. And if those changes never come, if the distance remains, then your task is not to chase what's not being offered. It's to turn your attention toward the people and the places that nourish you now. That might mean finding new community. It might mean spending time with other seniors who understand your stage of life and share your values. It might mean writing letters to yourself, documenting your memories, or mentoring someone who truly listens. Love doesn't only come from blood, it comes from presence, from shared spirit, from mutual care. And let's not forget this. Sometimes your absence helps your children grow. Sometimes it makes them more empathetic, more aware, more responsible. Maybe it's the thing that wakes them up from autopilot. Maybe your silence echoes louder than all the years of talking ever did. Or maybe not. Maybe your absence shows you who really never intended to stay close. And as painful as that is, it is still clarity. And clarity, my friend, is a kind of peace. I want you to imagine something for a moment. What if you stopped waiting? Not out of anger, not out of hurt, but out of calm acceptance. What if you started living as if your time mattered just as much as theirs? What if you made choices based on what brings you joy, not what keeps others comfortable? Because this life you're in now, it's still yours. These years, they're not leftovers. They're not a waiting room for visits that never come. They are a new season, and you deserve to live them with meaning. Go where you feel wanted. Speak when you're heard. Give where it's appreciated. And love, truly love, where you are received, not just tolerated. Maybe your kids will rise to meet you there. Maybe they won't. Either way, your path forward is yours to walk. With strength, with wisdom, and with dignity. So, what do your kids feel when you're not around? They feel the space. They feel the shift. And eventually, they feel the truth. But more importantly, what do you feel? If you feel hurt, acknowledge it. If you feel peace, protect it. If you feel love that isn't being returned, let it be a sign. A sign that it's time to give that love back to yourself. You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. And you are not here to wait in the shadows for someone to remember your name. Stand tall in your story. You've earned every line on your face, every scar on your heart, every lesson in your bones. If someone doesn't see that, it doesn't make you less. It just means they haven't learned how to look yet. So keep living. Keep loving. Keep being the kind of person you're proud to be. And know this, your presence matters, even when you're not in the room. Your legacy isn't built on how often they call, it's built on who you are when no one's watching. And who you are is still more than enough. If this message touched you in any way, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you felt, what you've learned, and how you've grown. Your story could be the one that helps someone else feel seen today. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We're building a community here for people just like you, who are ready to live their truth and reclaim the richness of these later years. You matter. You are loved. And this is not the end. This is your time. Here's to living your best life at any age. We'll see you in the next one.